because we're supposed to be out here at 5,
Well, you are live.
because we have multiple.
We're on, Senator, we're on. Senator,
You're live.
Senator.
Good afternoon. Meeting of Joint Legislative Management Committee, April 17th, 2025. We have a slender agenda, but some important items. So for the first one, on the position reallocation, I'll start with Secretary Bloomer, who is already in the witness chair.
I'll give you some background, Senator, and members of the committee. There's the statute that the Joint Legislative Management Committee has this committee dealing with personnel. That includes budgets, that includes allocation of positions. And so the first item is a position reallocation. And that is back in 2023, to give you some background, there was human resources needed a lawyer and more staffing up for various reasons. Things that were outstanding. And so at that time, the Legislative Council had a position that was vacant. And in November, I actually brought the minutes if people want them, but in I think it's November 2023, this committee reallocated or shifted a position from Leg Council that was vacant over into the human resources. Since about 2 years or a year and a half have gone by, a lot of the backlog in human resources has sort of been brought up to date. And at this point, Leg Council can always use a little bit more assistance because some of the demands that the legislature puts on them. And so in this sense, this is a motion that we would do to reallocate, transfer back to the Legislative Council, the position that was there and went to human resources. It would be generally dedicated to human resources issues, but then also be able to be used by Legislative Council for other topics or other drafting. So that's kind of the background. The two directors are both here. That's Arlene from Human Resources, and that's Bren Hare from Legislative Council. If you have lots of questions on how all that happens, they'll be here to answer those questions, but I'm here to give you a little background. And if there aren't questions, to kind of keep things moving forward. If there is a motion that you've all received in your email, it's also a couple copies up on the desk that would move this or transfer the position back along with the funding. The last part of that is because there are different departments, that's why you're involved. If they were both in Leg Council or they were both in the legislature, then you wouldn't necessarily have to be involved with the allocation. This would also take the money from the legislature, because the Human Resources Department is in the legislative budget, and move that funding that goes with the position over into the Legislative Council budget.
Ready for motion?
Yes, well, that's up to the chair.
If I might, so we have Arlene, Donovan, and Bryn Hare on the agenda. I don't know if either of you want to add anything at this point.
I don't think we need to add anything. John did an excellent job on summarizing, but here for any questions.
Okay, in that case, I would, in the absence of any questions, I would entertain a motion.
You better know, thank you. And I just apologize for moving too swiftly, but I move to approve the transfer of the Human Resources Attorney position back to Legislative Council, along with the positions associated budget allocation.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
We need a second.
Okay. Discussion. Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Representative Dolan.
Yes.
Representative Toof.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Beck.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Speaker Korinsky.
Yes.
Chair Baruth.
Yes. And passes unanimously. Thank you for that. So second item on the agenda is camera replacement. And again, Secretary is going to update us.
So there are, historically, it was structured a little bit different, how things are done in the building. Joint management was formed, which, as I mentioned earlier, you deal with management, staffing, and such. There's also a rules committee, which deals with the building and sort of where things happen in the common areas. And so I only mention that because cameras are an interesting topic. They were approved for installation by the rules committee. And the rules committee will make decisions as to where they go, what the policies are, but you deal with the money. And that's why there's a question before you today, because you deal with the budgeting for the legislature overall. There was a legislative, there was a grant that was approved to be used for camera and certain parts of it installed inside the building and outside. Then there was a flood and the cameras were lost. And in 2023, I think it was July, the cameras were lost. That particular grant requires that everything be expended and done by the 31st of August. And so that creates a bit of an issue because the state has not received all the reimbursement for the lost cameras. And those lost cameras need to be installed, they need to be ordered. Once again, there's people here to give you some additional background if you want from IT, from the State Secretary of State, from Joint Fiscal. But the idea here is that there needs to be a motion to approve use. I think it's $110,000 to buy the cameras pending reimbursement of FEMA and other insurance monies. Because if they're not done, then they can't buy the cameras. And if they can't buy the cameras, the grant goes away on the 31st. There'd be a second step for those of you who have some concerns or not concerns about cameras that would have to go before the Rules Committee when they're installed, once they're installed, what the procedures are, how they're used, whether or not they're activated. That's some point if people want history there. Let's go back to 15 years, back in the early 2011, 12, 13s, there were cameras. They were only activated on certain times inside, but that's a Rules Committee decision for common area. As the Speaker and Representatives know, the House chamber is yours. The Senate chamber is the Senate's, but for purposes of today's meeting, you are involved with the budget and you are allowing there to be used $110,000, I believe, of sort of surplus money that's in there that would be reimbursed after the FEMA money and the insurance money comes to the state.
Okay, and any questions for John before Senator Clarkson and then Representative Wood?
I have a question. So the placement is with joint rules and the House rules and Senate rules? Why is that not with the Legislative Committee on the Oversight of the State House or with joint legislative management?
It's not with joint management, legislative management, because by statute, you are with employees, staff, that's common, and you're entitled with the budget, policies, procedures. I may have sent you a copy of the statute that involved, there's like 5 topics, and the camera placement is not on that list.
It could be.
You can change the statute anytime you want, Senator. But currently, stuff that occurs in the common areas is kind of joint rules. It's a little bit like when you all did the mask policies. That was joint rules, not joint management. There was an overlap because joint management deals with the employees. So once joint rules decided kind of what happened in the building, joint management was involved to make sure that the employees followed sort of the similar process. And so you're involved with budgeting. And you can change the statute however you want. You could also go, as you may know, the final topic today is potentially an overview on state house renovations. There are not only this committee involved in a special committee, it's also the 2 institutions chairs. So if you wanted to do something different, that's up to you all to put in the statute. But the way the law is currently written and the way that the Rules Committee has functioned historically, they would be involved with deciding when those cameras were turned on, how they were turned on, and what the policy for use of those cameras.
And just a follow-up. So if they're exterior cameras and not interior cameras, if they're cameras aimed at the doors, so that's common. All the door areas are common. So that would be a joint rules decision on where to place.
That'd be my opinion. I believe that's.
So that's right there.
Representative Wood.
My question might actually be for Catherine. This says pending reimbursement by insurance or FEMA. And so I just am wondering if that for some reason doesn't happen, reimbursement doesn't happen, are these identified surplus funds or are they identified for some other potential purpose?
I'm going to turn to Scott from looking on this.
Yeah, actually, maybe stop more about this stuff. These funds would be from legislative carry forward.
Okay, and we have not identified any other purpose at this point in time. Thank you.
And I'll ask the same question I asked on the last item, which is Agatha, Catherine, or Scott, is there anything you want to add other than what we've heard?
No.
Okay. In that case, any committee discussion or questions? I view this as a kind of redundant item because we already approved them once.
Exactly. You ready for motion?
No, we have
Okay.
a question.
I was just gonna raise a motion, but I'll yield to the senator from Windsor.
No, my dear, you
Senator
go
from
first.
Cleveland Southeast yields to
Okay.
Senator.
Okay. I move to authorize the Sergeant at Arms in coordination with Legislative Information Technology and Joint Fiscal Offices to purchase cameras in advance of anticipated Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and insurance payouts, utilizing up to $110,000 of general funds previously appropriated to the Sergeant at Arms to ensure the State House camera project may proceed and that the grant deadline may be met.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Representative Dolan.
Yeah.
Representative Toof.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Beck.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Speaker Kowinski.
Yes.
Mayor Baruth.
Yes. And again, carries unanimously. Thank you. Our last item is our Sergeant at Arms. So if Agatha, if you could come up and join us. Thank you very much, Secretary. And this is a project update on State House renovations, redevelopment.
Yes, thank you. And before I get into that, I just want to, if it's okay, thank the Director of IT, Kevin Moore, Scott Moore, and Chief Polway on the camera project for just really being very helpful, supportive. You may know that Kevin has been sort of quarterbacking all of the FEMA claims for the State House. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm joined today also for the State House renovation overview, but with Commissioner Manoli, who's here. She can answer questions, anything that touches on BGS, and David Sheets, State Curator. So there's no vote today. This is really an update. And Chrissy, would you mind pulling up the PowerPoint? Thank you. We wanted to give a background on the project, a status update, and to prep you for what will be a vote, hopefully in the next month. We hope that in the next month, we'll actually come to you with designs, more designs that you can review and hopefully approve so we can move forward on the project. So a little bit of background as the slide deck is being pulled up. We all know the State House was built in 1859, more than 100 years ago. It's on the National Historic Landmark. And there are significant portions of the building that have been built and added on over periods of time. We have not had an update to the building since 1987 when the cafeteria was added. Over the course of many years, we've engaged with an architectural firm called Freeman French Freeman, and they've produced at least four studies on how space is used in the building. Thank you, Secretary Bloomer. And I neglected to thank Secretary Bloomer for his help in summarizing everything. I will call them inadequacies of the space in the building are well known and felt by the occupants of the building, whether they're legislators, members of the public, visitors, staff. The findings of these multiple reports, which some members of this committee have seen, are that access is inadequate, access to the building. Safety and security screening in the building is inadequate, and that's partly because of the physical limitations of the building. There are no underutilized space in the building. We've used every space of this building to its fullest function, and many of the spaces are multi-use. And occupants in general feel overcrowded. So this diagram shows you the significant updates to the building, starting with 1859, the main State House, 1886 was the annex, 1909 was the Speaker of the House addition, the ancillary infill was in 1958 to 1970, and then the latest was the cafeteria addition in 1987. So it's been almost 40 years since we've done a significant improvement to the building, and none of these improvements address an entrance to the building or access to the building. So the directive, the quote in the bottom, comes from one of the reports from the architects, which is to ensure any addition should ensure a safe working environment and efficient operation of the State House provide a secure, accessible entrance to mitigate the impact of any future pandemics, and to allow legislative functions to continue unimpaired. So a lot of this was driven by COVID. A lot of the momentum behind an addition was driven by COVID. So, Chrissy, if you wouldn't mind the next slide, a special committee was established, Act 69 of 2023. It is the chairs of the House Corrections and Institutions and Senate Institutions, along with Joint Legislative Management, to conduct the investigation into an addition. In December 15th of 2023, the special committee, so this body plus the two chairs of the institutions committees, approved an $11.5 million schematic design. And that design focused on the part that's circled here. It's an infill between, actually right here, an infill between these two major buildings. Schematic designs were due September 15th. On October 9th of last year, the working group, I neglected to identify who's part of the working group. It's myself, it's BGS, the state curator, project managers at BGS, historic preservation is a part of this, our own consultant, our architect consultant. We all worked together on a design that addressed the major findings of those reports. There were some major findings about access, security, life safety. To address all of those was a design that was around $24 million, much different than the $11.5 million that was originally approved. So the committee at that time said it's too expensive. This is not what we asked for. Please go back and come back with more designs. So I'm referring to as a scaled down design. Those were not your words. Those were kind of just words I'm using to simplify it. So thank you, Chrissy. So the initial design, that $25 million design, and these drawings on the right, they're very exciting, but don't get too excited about them. They're conceptual. This is what it could look like. That $25 million design that addressed the findings in those several reports, where we need an entryway, one entryway that people can see and know this is how you get into the building. An atrium, and that would be on the Pink Lady side of the building. An atrium and corridor that would connect you from that entryway to this Lincoln hallway. So this would become the main entrance for visitors to the State House. A third element was a stairwell with an elevator that would be attached to that entryway. That would provide a stretcher compliant elevator. We do not have a stretcher compliant elevator in the State House. And I will say that whenever I say we're not compliant, we are up to code. We have a lot of waivers in the building that keep us legal. But if, for example, you built the State House today, many of the features we have in the building would not pass code, but we do have waivers for all of these. So stretcher compliant elevator is one of those. And then the stairwell, the addition would give an improved ramp to the cafeteria. So we all know that kind of plank into the cafeteria is the only way in. So this addition would give an improved ramp with a better slope. It would give 2 additional committee rooms, which, by the way, we've actually taken care of with the mezzanine project. So item number 5 is potentially no longer necessary. It would give a fire escape to the Senate chamber, a fire escape to the Speaker and the House Clerk's office, and a restroom on the 3rd floor in the 40s. That was the $25 million project, and it is considered excessive or too much, not resembling the $11.5 million. So the revised design, which we hope to come back this month or in a month, the goalposts, and this is where the check-in is. It's not a vote of this committee, but it's a kind of a check-in. Our goalposts are that we are focusing on ADA and access. We're focusing on the secure entryway with a corridor to the Lincoln hallway. And we are focusing on options for future improvements so that we could build in the future. So if we don't have the 2 committee rooms now, we would build a foundation for maybe more committee rooms, more offices, more executive space, whatever it is. And those are sort of our goalposts. So with that said, it's likely that the next designs you will see will have many of the items 1 through 8 not reflected. And I would propose that we will bring designs back that reflect the entryway, the atrium, and the corridor to the Lincoln hallway, and then potentially costs associated with the other items on the list. And they could be separate projects or add-ons down the road, whatever the legislature feels is appropriate and that they can support funding for. So if you wouldn't mind, Christy, next slide. The next and future steps would be for the working group to present revised design options to JLMC and the chairs of the institutions committees. I do want to note that when we talk about money, we're talking about the building itself. We're not talking about any domino effects on, for example, the parking lot or traffic patterns. Those are all parts of the next phase of design. Adding on to the Pink Lady side of the building will most likely affect parking. And that is our handicap parking on that side. So there would be, it's likely there would be additional projects that would be domino effects from this one project. So parking, traffic, and then the construction schedule itself, when we come back, we hope to have some options for construction schedule. Normally, we don't do any construction during the legislative season, like our HVAC project, we pause it during the legislative session. But we are exploring with Freeman French Freeman if there would be any savings in doing consecutive construction and kind of working through what might be distractions of construction if we could have a significant savings. So we will propose those as well. We hope to propose those as well. And then below is just kind of where we are in the planning. So it's schematic design. That's where we are. In the next few weeks, we hope to come back with designs to complete that part. You would approve us so that we can move into design development for 26 weeks, then construction documents for 14 weeks, BGS review for 6 weeks, bidding negotiation for 10 weeks. All of that is about a year before we even break ground. So that's kind of just a status update on the project.
And if I could, because we have our agenda running until 5 and several people have commitments, rather than, we could talk because it's our work home.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk for a long time about potential changes to it, but I would suggest that we just focus on what Agatha has said in terms of, can you go back one slide, Chrissy?
Yes.
I think it was. So correct me if I'm wrong, Agatha, what you really need from us is any thoughts on the stripped down bullet points.
Yes.
Okay,
So I would propose that the next crop of designs we present to you would focus on number 1 and 2, an entryway and atrium and corridor to the Lincoln hallway. But if anyone had other thoughts, I'd want to hear about that.
Senator Clarkson. And then
So remind us all, because some of us are new legislators and some of us are old legislators. And there've been many things we were trying to accomplish with this renovation. And what I'm not seeing here is what we're accomplishing in the atrium. Because my understanding when we did have the legislative committee on the State House was that we were looking at being able to accommodate our school groups. One of the big needs was a welcome space for our school groups and a place for them to get oriented and put their things. And that the atrium, as we had envisioned, were going to be rooms off of it to accomplish all these things and have a big coat room and stuff. Is that what you're assuming is in the, I just would love to know what's assumed in the atrium word.
Yes, we haven't gotten to the point of identifying exactly what will be in the atrium, but in the conversations, we've talked about things. The focus is getting people through the building safely and efficiently, and school groups, tour groups. In the fall, when a bus pulls up with 50 people, them all coming in all at once. These are all the use cases that we talk about when the working group comes together. So yes, that atrium would contemplate a way to get school groups in quietly, safely. Right now, they all kind of come into the lobby right outside the Sergeant at Arms office, and it is an exceptionally loud. Senator Sears would oftentimes come outside and quiet people down. It's not the best way to host a group of people in the building. So the atrium would provide that space, and there would be access to the coat room. We haven't talked about it in detail, but we know that we want to have a better spot for our gift shop. Have it be a single point of information for people who are coming in and they don't know where they're going. They don't know where M103 and M106 are, where they're going. So it would be a way, absolutely, to provide more visitor services to people coming to the State House. And I will say it may affect, we haven't gotten to this point yet, but our staffing model. We may come to you with a proposal that we would like to have a person sitting at the front desk and welcoming people, maybe to be a volunteer. But right now we're focused on the building and the construction and getting the walls up. But yes, we have absolutely contemplated school groups and visitors.
Representative Wood.
Thank you. Thank you for this update. Appreciate it. I think that it would be illogical for us to not consider as part of this project changes that we would need in parking. Because
Yes.
then you would have an accessible entrance, but you would have no way to address the parking that's required for an accessible entrance. So that, I think, has to be part of this and not further down the road. I just heard you made mention that it's not part of what is contemplated, but I think it has to be part of what's contemplated. The other thing that I am concerned about is the need for an elevator at that entrance, because it is not logical for people requiring accessibility to access the two committee rooms right now. They have to go through a maze of taking, I don't think that I guess it needs to be clearer that people can go into the elevator that is, I don't know what you call it, elevator 1 or 2 or whatever.
The service elevator, the one that's by the
Right,
vending
it's
machine.
this
Yes.
elevator, and it's not meant for, for the general public. And so I feel like we need to improve upon that, because we have 2 committee rooms now that are located. And so people who need accessibility modification or assistance, I don't think it's obvious to them that that is the place that they go.
Absolutely. And those experiences drive the design, that it is very hard. We are compliant, but we need to do better than compliant. People get very confused in the building about where to go, especially people who have accessibility issues. Yes.
Yeah, and the parking, and with the snow removal and, snow coming off the various buildings and it being safe or not safe, I think,
Mhm.
I was concerned when I heard you say that, this is only the building, and I think we have to include the parking.
Yes. I meant to, if I could clarify, I meant that more from a budget perspective, like when you see the numbers, 25 million, 11.5 million, that is just the building. Parking, and I will, if you don't mind, Commissioner Manoli, parking is on the top of our list of things that we think about when we're designing. I think that would come more into the design development, which is the next phase of design work. Is that where maybe civil engineers would start to be engaged and we talk more about the surrounding areas that would be impacted by the construction?
I think, yes, but we could do a little design and estimating on that, because I think, what is it really gonna look like and what does it mean would probably be very important to this committee.
Yes.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, I don't want an estimate for the building only.
Yes.
An estimate for the building and where people are going to park.
Yes.
The building.
And I'm in complete agreement. I will tell you that we are completely maxed out on our accessible parking. Every single spot is used by a legislator or a staff person. And to the point where when we have visitors, true members of the public that come to the building and need a handicap spot, we sometimes do not have a handicap spot to provide to them. So we have contingencies in place, which usually include having a staff person move their car, but it is not at all adequate.
I just wanted to make sure that when we see the next round of numbers, it includes parking.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, so I had similar concerns that Representative Wood shared. One other one that wasn't mentioned yet, though, is because you shared about looking at construction during the session. And so I just wanted to make sure that accessibility was being considered for them. Because it seems like this would be happening in the most accessible entryway. So just making sure.
It is.
Right there as well.
And I don't mean to smirk. The most accessible way into the State House is also the loading dock. Is also where the ice falls off the building. So, which really kind of puts a fine point on the need for an entryway. So all of those would be considered as we're weighing is what are the pros and cons of consecutive construction and interrupting the accessibility spot for the building. we would have to consider all of those things. Yes.
So we are at time. We're not looking for a vote on this. It was an update to raise the committee's awareness on what to expect
Mhm.
next time out. So if there's no other questions.
I only have one question. What's the timing? So like, I saw the little arrow, but
Yes.
when would we expect, like June? When are we expecting the next update with more concepts in mind?
What would be within a month that we would come back to you before the end of May with more designs to contemplate. With again, the focus being the entryway and the corridor to the Lincoln hallway. And then once we get there, hopefully we'll present you with a design that you can approve, and then we would move into the next phase, design development. But it's probably another year of planning and looking at designs and working out all the details about parking and how we're going to specifically use the space. So probably another year.
Great. So with that said, I think our business is complete. Thank you very much, Sergeant at Arms. And we'll declare the meeting